Oh yeah, today we're going to talk about Bond Number 9 Silver Factory. Hi everybody, welcome back to Tunes Reviews. Today is the day that we discuss the fragrance that got me introduced to collecting and crafting this larger-than-life hobby and getting me involved in fragrance reviewing even more so than I already had interest before. Bond Number 9 Silver Factory. Bond Number 9 Silver Factory, I don't really feel like getting into all the details of it, especially nowadays when you have a million reviewers on the platform and it's a simple Google click away. If you go to Fragrantica or the Bond Number 9 website or what have you, you can see like the pyramid breakdown of the notes, the year it was released, etc., so on, so forth. What I want to get right into is the meat and potatoes of this fragrance, the nostalgia behind it, its significance for my journey, and what it all means to me. Because that's what we're here for, is to talk about me. If Eugene doesn't like this fragrance, then I'm just going to go ahead and stop reviewing because I can't take it that he would bash one of my favorite fragrances of all time. Hi, Eugene. Hi, Christo. I hope we can get together soon. Anyways, Bond Number 9 Silver Factory. Boy, picture 19-year-old Justin Bieber looking son of a bitch Tim, okay? With the douche bro thing going on, with the hat that's like tilted slightly and the Bieber hair and the, oh my goodness gracious, why did it happen? Because. To learn a valuable lesson. Which valuable lesson was that, Tim? Don't be a douche. So picture 19-year-old Tim, having collected fragrances for some time. I'm honest to God, telling the truth, when I started collecting fragrances, I was literally probably about 8 or 9 years old. Now, granted, they were fragrances like Preferred Stock, never Stetson, but Navy, things like that, Adidas Moves, until I got into 6th grade when I got my first bottle of Tommy by Tommy Hilfiger, and then Dior Higher was my fragrance that I wore for 2 or 3 years straight, and Fierce and Nautica Competition and all those fun things. So I'd always had a pretty solid little collection of fragrances since I was a boy, literally. But 19-year-old Tim comes on the platform of YouTube and wants to check out, I'm talking about myself in the third person, talking about myself in the third person like a real douche. So I come on the platform of YouTube and I want to check out Angel Men by Thierry Mugler, because when I had been at Macy's right around the Christmas season, I had just gone through a breakup and I had just purchased Armani White Diamonds and I didn't really care for it. It was okay, but it didn't scream me. I didn't want to wear Fierce anymore because it reminded me of all these memories that I had constructed centered around wearing this fragrance with this girl that I dated. And I didn't want to be reminded of anymore. There's too much. It was too much. I tried Angel Men and never heard of it. So for whatever reason, it struck a chord and I absolutely loved it. And I couldn't believe that I kept smelling it. And it was unlike anything I'd ever tried. I'd never tried a Gourmand really up until that point. And found Mark and Tim Sweatkoff and Cubby and this whole world, other fragrance reviewers that were lesser known at the time that became huge, like Brandon, Cutlass Supreme SL, and Teresa and J.R. Ryder, all these guys, Kerosene. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Why don't I start reviewing? Because I had a pretty solid base of knowledge in the whole fragrance world, just based on the plethora of designers that I had owned at that point. That's what led me here with you lovely folks. More specifically, this fragrance right here led me to this point. And let me tell you why. As the journey had carried through maybe about 6 months, I asked Mark, maybe not 6 months, maybe 4 months, 3 months, something like that. I had asked Mark what he recommended for niche fragrances. I had kind of reviewed quite a few, because when I started, I was just like hot and heavy, banging out fragrance reviews every week, probably multiple times a week. I was really into it. I was loving it. I was loving FragCom. I was loving this whole new world I was getting to explore. I was blind buying left and right. This was the age of Gucci, Pour Homme 1 and 2, and YSL Opium, and all these wonderful fragrances that I'm trying for the first time. I mean, I basically at the time had no bills, so half of my paycheck every week was literally going to new bottles. It was a fun, exciting, reckless time. Within 3 months, I had pretty much tried all the staples, you know, the 1 Million and the YSL La Nuit de l'Homme and all those fragrances and Le Male. And I wanted to try some of the more upper scale, more expensive fragrances at this point. You know, I'd heard all about Tom Ford and whatever. So I was seeking counsel from Mark, and I wanted to know, you know, what does a beginner, an untrained nose as far as like niche, what does one start with? And he recommended, you know, he said it was time for me to move on to Creed and Bond Number 9, which to this day I would say are both very solid houses to start out with if you haven't experienced niche in the way of like Musk Kublai Khan by Serge Lutens or something along those lines, or a Musk Ravageur or whatever. If you start out with those, you're just going to be overwhelmed, I think, and not appreciate it. With Bond Number 9, I'd ordered pretty much every sample that there was available. At the time, you could order what they call, I think they call them bonbons, and they come in these little, they look like little plastic candies. They remind me of the same way that Smarties are kind of put together in the little twist tie. Very colorful and pretty and whatever. I think it was like $30 for 5 samples, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Maybe 15, whatever, it's not important. Obviously, the prices would have changed by now anyways, because it's been 10 years almost. But I tried every single Bond Number 9 within like 2 weeks. And I tried probably about 5 Creeds. Creeds were a little bit more difficult to get your hands on at the time. There wasn't just like readily available samples. A little bit more jumping through hoops in order to obtain one of those samples for a Creed. I had come to the conclusion that I had basically enjoyed Bond Number 9's Little Italy, which I know is shit on unbelievably to the point of like it becoming extinct within Fragcom. I wouldn't wear it now, but I did enjoy it back then. I enjoyed Little Italy, Bleecker Street, and New Harlem, and Brooklyn, and Silver Factory the most. Those 5 were the 5 that I was like, I really enjoy those. But the one that set itself apart from the rest of the others, in my mind, was clearly Silver Factory. I felt like there was no competition back then, and I feel that way today, that when you're given the whole spectrum of fragrances that they've got, you know, take your pick, nothing really comes close as far as quality goes. To this day, it's the only Bond Number 9 that I still own. And the only reason for that actually is because New Harlem's been discontinued, and you can't find it for under like $400 now, so, but kind of fuck that, it's not worth that much money. It's ridiculous and preposterous. But yeah, Silver Factory, I was just immediately smitten by. It was unlike anything I'd ever tried. It was probably, I think, my first resinous fragrance, in the sense of it being, you know, heavily based on incense and amber, with that really nice spicy sweetness and some of the iris that makes it have a little creamy quality to it. And it was just absolutely mesmerizing and opened my eyes. It was eye-opening as far as like what kinds of feelings I can conjure up from this from Fragcom and the fragrance journey and different fragrances. I'd never felt the way that I felt about this prior to it with any other fragrance. I felt confident by things. You know, Dior Higher to this day remains one of my favorite designer fragrances because of how it made me feel, and it's a really well-constructed fragrance that should have never been discontinued in my opinion. But this thing just, it kind of put it all together. All the pieces were coming together at this point. It made it so my obsession became that much more intense. It opened up a whole new genre fragrance for me. The resinous incense-based fragrances, the more dense ones. I was no longer looking for things that were just crowd-pleasing. I was no longer looking for things that would attract the opposite sex or whatever. It was just purely based on my relationship with the fragrance and what it made me feel and the nostalgia that it could come up with. To this day, Bond Number 9 Silver Factory is a solid 10 out of 10 for me because not only do I find its construct and the way that it smells to be a absolute fucking masterpiece, and I'm not saying that grounded in some kind of bias. Clearly I love the thing, but the fragrance is just so well constructed. It's amber and its resinous qualities and its incense is just really well done, in the same vein as something that Tom Ford would come out with. It reminds me heavily of Sahara Noir, if you never got the chance to try it, and not necessarily on the same level as an Amber Absolute, or even similar, but because I get more incense out of this fragrance, but it reminds me of like some of the Comme des Garçons Kyoto. So I find that this is the exception to the brand. Just because it's Bond number 9, I don't want you to think that it's going to be some basic designer juice with a more heavy price point on it. That happens to be the case for about 90% of everything that they offer, in my opinion. However, there are these heavy hitters sprinkled throughout. There's a couple of them, and this one just does it for me. I think that this is one of the sexiest, most inviting, most warming fragrances I have ever come across. You can judge me if you want, you snobs out there, if you're gonna watch this and say, what the fuck is this guy talking about? I'm telling you, if you like incense, amber fragrances, just, it's not gonna get much better than this. There are some that are a little bit more mature, a little bit more refined, a little rough, a little less rough around the edges, whatever the case may be, but this one just does it. It makes it all come together, and it's sexy as fuck too. I think that the more I wear this, the more unisex it becomes in my mind, where if I smelled this on a girl, I'd be absolutely enchanted by the woman as a whole, as like being able to pull this thing off, because it's bombastic a little bit. At first, I thought that it was leaning more masculine, but nowadays I think that it's perfectly unisex. That being said, unfortunately, Bond number 9 lost the rights to Andy Warhol's artwork, and it's now called Silver Bond. I'm not sure if you can still find it on the website itself, but you can find it on discounters like FragranceNet, and it's usually about $150 to $170 American. Unfortunately, to find this bottle, you're gonna have to look on eBay, and sometimes they come with a hefty price, sometimes they don't. I was lucky enough to find my second bottle of Bond number 9 Silver Factory for a very decent price and scoop it up while nobody was paying attention, apparently, unless it's just one of those things where it's a hidden gem, or I'm just one of the only people that ever really cared about it. I'm not sure, but I absolutely love this fragrance. It is magnetic to me. Magnetic. I think that this is a perfect daily fragrance too. It's casual for fall and winter and early spring, but it can also be dressed up. It is a Swiss Army knife. I guess with the exception of it not being necessarily very good for those hotter months. It's not good for summer. It's not good for late spring, where it's starting to get into like the 80s territory. But other than that, it is absolutely gorgeous, and it is absolutely perfect for the cooler months and for pretty much any time, anywhere. I think that this is, again, an absolute masterpiece and slept on so hard in the fragrance community. And it's a very unfortunate thing, because I think at some point it's probably just going to be phased out altogether, which is going to make me sad, because I'm going to have to stock up on this bad boy, and then when it's gone, it's gone. So that being said, this fragrance absolutely kickstarted my fragrance journey into high gear. And I'm kind of forever grateful for that, because I've met some really cool people throughout this journey and gotten my nose on some really wonderful fragrances because of this guy right here. And thank you, Mark, for the recommendation back then and helping guide me as a new nose to Fragcom. And I hope that for all of us out there now that have been around for a while, we can kind of help some of the newcomers and guide them in the right direction as well. And I hope that you all get your nose on this while you still can. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you all for tuning in. See ya.